Hello, fellow pondologists. Welcome to the first episode of a new series called Pond Weed Problems. In this series, we will go over how to control certain aquatic weeds or pests in your pond. A weed, by definition, is a plant that is growing where it is not wanted. Much like your lawn, if you have a patch of crabgrass in the middle of your beautiful Kentucky bluegrass, you're probably gonna want to try and get rid of the crabgrass, right? Well, the same mindset could be applied to your pond. It's your pond, so whatever you consider a weed is a weed, and if you want to get rid of said weed, then don't let anyone tell you that you can't. In each episode, we will talk about a different weed species and my top preferences for how to control them. Make sure to check your local laws and regulations before using any of the recommended treatment options. In this episode, although not a plant, we will talk about one of the most notorious pond pests, Filamentous algae. Filamentous algae, also known as moss, represents one of the most frequent challenges for pond owners. Effective management of this organism begins not with immediate chemical application, but with a foundational understanding of its biology, the environmental factors that drive its proliferation, and its role within the aquatic ecosystem. This ecological perspective is essential for developing a control strategy that is not only effective in the short term, but also a sustainable in the long term. So proper identification is the first critical step in any management plan, as different types of algae may respond differently to various treatments. Filamentous algae are characterized by their growth in long hair-like strands or threads that intertwine to form dense mats, floating mats on the surface. These mats often begin their growth at the bottom or attached to some submerged objects before rising to the surface as they mature and trap gases produced during photosynthesis and other biological processes. It is important to distinguish filamentous algae from other common aquatic growths. Planktonic algae, for instance, are microscopic, single-celled organisms that remain suspended in the water column, giving the pond a greenish tint. Another common organism is Chara. It is often mistaken for a submerged plant, but it is actually a macroalgae. It has a distinct gritty, bristly texture, musk odor when crushed, unlike soft, slimy feel of most filamentous algae species. Filamentous algae, like all plants, require two primary ingredients to thrive, sunlight for photosynthesis and a steady supply of nutrients. The explosive growth that leads to nuisance blooms is almost always the direct consequence of an overabundance of nutrients in the water, primarily phosphorus and nitrogen. These algae are particularly efficient at absorbing nutrients directly from the water column, meaning their growth is directly tied to the nutrient load of the pond and its substrate. Common sources of these excess nutrients include runoff from fertilized lawns and agricultural fields, waste from livestock or pets, decaying organic matter such as leaves or grass clippings, and even the deliberate feeding of fish or waterfowl. A pond with a high nutrient load is essentially a pre-fertilized garden primed for an algae bloom the moment environmental conditions come about, such as warm temperature, ample sunlight. It becomes favorable to them. The presence of a severe filamentous algae bloom is not the problem itself, but rather a symptom of a deeper systemic issue of nutrient pollution. Any management strategy that fails to address this root cause is destined to become a temporary fix or a band-aid, locking the pond owner into a perpetual and often costly cycle of chemical treatment and regrowth. The most responsible approach to pond management is an integrated pest management strategy, which prioritizes long-term prevention and uses a combination of methods to achieve control. Within an IPM framework, chemical algicides are viewed as a reactive tool, a powerful but temporary intervention designed to regain control of a severe bloom. They are most effective when used to knock back the infestation, creating a window of opportunity for the pond owner to implement the more fundamental long-term preventative measures that address the underlying nutrient problem. When a filamentous algae bloom becomes severe enough to warrant chemical intervention, pond owners are faced with a range of algicide options. The most common and effective products fall into two main categories: traditional copper-based compounds and modern peroxide-based oxidizers. Each has a distinct mechanism of action, a unique set of advantages and disadvantages, and specific requirements for safe and effective use. The choice of algicide is not a simple matter of just selecting the best one, but rather involves a strategic, trade-off between cost and speed of action, environmental risk, and the specific characteristics of the pond being treated. Other aquatic herbicides also offer, but come with their own particular limitations. Copper has been the standard active ingredient in most algicides due to its effectiveness and relatively low cost. It works by disrupting essential cellular processes in algae such as photosynthesis and cell division, ultimately causing the cell membrane to rupture and leak. Copper sulfate is the most widely available and least expensive form of copper algicide. It typically is sold as blue crystals or granulars that are dissolved in water before application. While it is rated as, excellent for controlling most species of algae, its effectiveness and safety are profoundly dependent on the pond's water chemistry, specifically its total alkalinity. The primary limitation of copper sulfate is its interaction with carbonates in the water. In ponds with high alkalinity, 200 plus, the abundant carbonate ions rapidly bind with the copper, causing it to precipitate out of the solution and settle into the sediment, where it becomes biologically unavailable and thus ineffective against the algae that it's trying to treat. On the other hand, in soft water with low alkalinity, less than 50 parts per million, there are insufficient carbonates to, buffer the copper. This allows the copper to remain in its most soluble and toxic ionic form, creating a high risk of poisoning and actually killing fish, even at recommended application rates. This narrow operational window makes copper sulfate a powerful but unforgiving tool that requires precise knowledge of water chemistry for safe use. To overcome the limitations of copper sulfate, chelated copper algicides were developed. Chelation is a process that binds copper ions to an organic molecule or chelating agent. This process is like the protective shell on an M&M. The shell protects the core ingredients from the outside environment. In the case of an algicide, the chelating agent protects the copper from precipitating out of the water in high alkalinity conditions. The chelation provides several significant advantages. The product remains suspended and active in the water column for a much longer time, increasing its contact time with the target algae and enhancing its effectiveness. Because it is more stable and efficient, a lower concentration of copper is actually needed to achieve the control that you want, making it actually more ecologically friendly option and a higher margin of safety for the fish compared to the copper sulfate. While more expensive than basic copper sulfate, chelated copper products represent a significant advancement in the algicide technology, offering more reliable control across a broader range of water conditions. They are available in both liquid and granular forms. The granular algicides are particularly useful for targeting bottom-growing filamentous algae. A more modern and environmentally benign approach to algae control involves the use of peroxide-based algicides. These products are often presented as a safer alternative to copper, particularly in sensitive environments or ponds with copper-sensitive fish such as koi and trout. The active ingredient in these products is typically sodium carbonate peroxyhydrate, SCP for short. When these granules are applied to water, they undergo a chemical reaction, breaking down into sodium carbonate and hydrogen peroxide. The hydrogen peroxide is the potent, fast-acting algicide. It works through oxidation and a process that aggressively destroys the algal cell membranes and chlorophyll on contact. This mode of action is visibly apparent, often producing a fizzing or bubbling as oxygen is released and the algae begin to discolor and die within minutes of application. Peroxide-based algicides offer several compelling benefits. Their action is extremely rapid, providing almost immediate results. Perhaps their most significant advantage is their environmental profile. After reacting with the algae, the hydrogen peroxide quickly, decomposes into harmless water and oxygen, leaving no chemical residue or persistent toxins in the pond. This makes them exceptionally safe for all water uses, including swimming, fishing, irrigation, with no required waiting period after treatment. Furthermore, SCP products have a significantly higher margin of safety for fish and most non-target aquatic organisms compared to copper-based algicides. While they can be a bit more expensive than copper products, their safety profile makes them the ideal choice for ponds with sensitive fish like koi and trout. While copper and peroxide compounds are the primary algicides, several other aquatic herbicides are also rated as good to excellent for controlling filamentous algae and may be considered in specific situations. Diquat is a broad spectrum contact herbicide that can control some species of filamentous algae. Its major limitation is that the active ingredient binds tightly to suspended sediment particles. Therefore, it should not be used in muddy or turbid water, as it will be quickly inactivated and rendered ineffective. Indithol, or the amine salt formulation of indithol, is a potent contact herbicide and algicide. However, it is highly toxic to fish at concentrations above 0.3 parts per million and can be severely irritating to the skin and eyes of the applicator. Its use requires extreme caution and is often best left to licensed professional. Flumioxazin, this herbicide is effective against certain tough-to-control filamentous algae like Pathophora, Cladophora. Its primary constraint is its sensitivity to the pH. Anything above a 7.5 pH, it does not last more than a few minutes. For it to be effective, it must be applied in the morning when the pH is naturally at its lowest point for the day. The safe and successful application of any chemical hinges entirely on a thorough pre-treatment assessment. Every chemical algicide and herbicide label provides dosage rates based on the volume of water to be treated. An inaccurate volume calculation is the first and most common path to failure. The standard unit for measuring the volume of a pond is acre-feet. 1 acre-foot is the volume of water required to cover 1 surface acre to a depth of 1 foot. The formula to calculate the volume of a pond in acre-feet is the surface acres times the average depth. For example, if you had a pond that is 1 acre in surface area and has an average depth of 1 foot, there is 1 acre foot of water volume. Total alkalinity is a measure of the water's capacity to neutralize acids. It is primarily determined by the concentration of carbonates and bicarbonates dissolved in the water, and it is expressed in parts per million of calcium carbonate. It is crucial to understand that total alkalinity is not the same as pH. Water hardness, which measures the calcium and magnesium ions. While these parameters are often related, total alkalinity is the specific measurement that governs the behavior of copper in water. An irrigation water test, available through local extension services can provide this value. You can also go to our website and purchase a water quality test kit. The kit we provide comes with a suite of water quality parameters such as phosphorus, nitrogen, nitrite, nitrate, decaying, total alkalinity, pH, conductivity, hardness, calcium, magnesium. More than that, you'll not only get the measurements for each measured parameter, you also get an in-depth discussion about how each one affects the pond's biological processes and how to improve them if necessary. So go to pondology101.com today to get your kit. The total alkalinity level of a pond dictates both the safety and the efficacy of copper sulfate, creating a very specific operational window. In water with low alkalinity, copper is highly soluble and exists predominantly in its free ionic form, which is toxic to fish. Applying copper sulfate in these soft water conditions is exceptionally dangerous and can lead to a fish kill from just direct copper poisoning. For this reason, copper treatments are not recommended in water with a total alkalinity below 50 parts per million. In the Ultimate Pond Management Playbook, available on our website, I go over how to improve the pond's alkalinity. There are many other advantages to having good alkalinity in your pond other than the ability to apply copper-based algicides. Nutrient uptake and the buffering capacity of the water play a huge role in a healthy aquatic ecosystem and fishery. In water with very high alkalinity, the opposite problem occurs. The abundant carbonate and bicarbonate ions in the water quickly bind to the copper ions, causing them to precipitate out and become insoluble copper carbonate. This renders the copper biologically unavailable to the algae, making the treatment ineffective. In such cases, a chelated copper product, which is designed to resist precipitation, is a much more effective choice. With a thorough pre-treatment assessment completed, you can proceed to the application phase with confidence. The correct application method is not universal. It depends on the chosen chemical, copper versus peroxide, its physical form, liquid versus granular, and the specific nature of the algae infestation, surface mats versus bottom growth. Adhering to precise dosing, utilizing the proper equipment, and treating under optimal environmental conditions are all key to maximizing efficacy while minimizing risk. The application of copper-based products, particularly copper sulfate, is a science that requires strict adherence to a formula-based approach to ensure safety and effectiveness. The safe and effective dosage of copper sulfate is not a fixed number. It's a variable that must be calculated based on the pond's volume in acre feet and its total alkalinity, parts per million. This calculation ensures that enough copper is applied to control the algae without reaching levels that are toxic to fish in that specific water chemistry. The standard formula for this calculation is the pounds of copper sulfate equals acre feet times the total alkalinity times 2.72. The factor of 2.72 is a constant that represents the weight in pounds of copper sulfate needed to achieve a 1.0 parts per million concentration in 1 acre foot of water. This formula-based approach removes guesswork and is essential for safe application. The physical method of introducing the copper into the pond is just as important as the dosage. The most effective way to apply copper is to first dissolve the crystals completely in a bucket of water and then spray the solution evenly over the target area. This technique ensures the algicide is well dispersed throughout the water column, maximizing contact with floating algae and preventing the formation of concentrated hotspots on the pond bottom that can be toxic to benthic organisms and ineffective for surface algae. For pre-formulated liquid chelated copper products, the label may recommend a specific dilution ratio for use in like a backpack sprayer. Granular copper products can be applied in several ways. They can be broadcasted by hand or with a spreader directly over the water, which is pretty useful for targeting algae that is growing on the pond bottom. Another traditional method involves placing the crystals in a porous burlap sack and actually dragging it behind a boat in a grid pattern across the treatment area until the crystals dissolve all the way. Copper is corrosive to many metals, therefore all equipment used for it should be made of plastic or stainless steel to prevent corrosion. It is also critical to rinse the equipment thoroughly right after you're done using it. The application of sodium carbonate peroxyhydrate, SCP, is generally straightforward compared to copper, as its safety is not dependent on water alkalinity. However, dosage still needs to be matched to the severity of the algae problem. Unlike copper sulfate, there is no universal calculation formula for peroxide-based algicides. Instead, product labels provide a range of application rates based on the density of the algal growth. The applicator must visually assess the pond to determine the appropriate rate within this range. For severe, thick mats, a rate at the higher end of the scale will be necessary. SCP is a contact algicide, meaning it must physically touch the algae to work. The application method is designed to maximize this contact. The granular product is typically broadcast evenly over the surface of the water, concentrating the application on the areas where algae mats are the thickest. For best results, it is recommended to break up dense floating mats with a rake or a high pressure stream of water just before application. This allows the granulars to penetrate the mat better rather than just sitting on top. Application should be done on a calm, sunny morning. Calm conditions ensure the granulars land where they are targeted, and both sunlight and warmer water temperatures accelerate the chemical reaction, increasing the product's effectiveness. Regardless of the algicide chosen, certain environmental conditions will optimize the treatment's success, like water temperature. Algicides are most effective when algae are actively growing and their metabolic rates are pretty high. This generally requires a water temperature of at least 50 degrees, with most labels recommending treatment when temperatures get around 60 degrees Fahrenheit consistently. The time of day is another good one. Applying them in the early morning is almost always best practice. This is when the pond's pH is naturally at its lowest, which is critical for pH-sensitive products like flumioxazin. It is also the ideal time for peroxide-based products that are enhanced by sunlight. Furthermore, applying early in the day avoids compounding the natural drop in dissolved oxygen that occurs in a pond overnight, providing a greater buffer for safety for the fish. The physical form and application method of an algicide are not interchangeable. They are tactical choices. A liquid or dissolved spray is a surface-acting weapon ideal for floating mats. Granules are a bottom-acting tool designed to sink and control submerged growth. Matching the tool to the target is a key principle for maximizing the efficiency and effectiveness of any chemical treatment. Certain fish species are exceptionally sensitive to copper. It must be stated unequivocally that copper sulfate and even many chelated copper products should not be used in ponds containing koi, ornamental goldfish, or trout. These species can be killed by copper concentrations that are well within the normal range used to control algae. For ponds with these sensitive species, a peroxide-based algicide is the only responsible chemical choice. In addition to nutrient reduction, several other practices can be integrated to create a less hospitable environment for filamentous algae. Installing a bottom diffused aeration system is one of the single most beneficial investments for pond health. It increases the dissolved oxygen levels, which is vital for fish and beneficial bacteria. The circulation it creates helps to prevent stagnant water, and by keeping the bottom water oxygenated, it can help to chemically bind the phosphorus into the sediment, making it unavailable for plant or algae growth. For small manageable infestations, physically removing algae mats with a rake or skimmer can provide immediate control. It's important to dispose of the algae far from the pond's edge to prevent the nutrients contained within it from washing back into the water as it decomposes. This is the one method you will not find me performing. It's very labor intensive and time consuming, so you won't find me doing that. If you have the energy and the time, by all means go for it. Non-toxic aquatic dyes can be used to color the pond, typically shades of blue or black. It limits the sunlight penetration into the water column, inhibiting photosynthesis required for algae growth and plant growth. They're most effective as a preventative measure, when applied early in the spring before algae become established, and are generally not really effective in water less than 2 feet. Applying a phosphorus binding agent treats the underlying issue, legacy phosphorus. Especially if your pond is older than 15 years, it builds up in the bottom sediment. This accumulation of phosphorus is the main driver of excessive algae growth. I won't go into very much detail about the entire phosphorus cycle, but if you apply an adequate amount of phosphorus binding agent, you can essentially reset your pond's phosphorus load, ultimately reducing the density of all photosynthetic organisms. The use of barley straw is a popular non-chemical method for algae control, though its effectiveness is a subject of debate. The prevailing theory is that the straw decomposes in oxygenated water. It releases chemical compounds, possibly a form of hydrogen peroxide that interfere with algal reproduction. For barley straw to have a chance of being effective, it should be placed in the pond in the early spring before the algae begins to grow, as it can take several weeks for the decomposition process to become active. The recommended rate is typically 2 to 5 bales per surface acre. I do know a lot of ranchers that roll big hay bales into their ponds every year, and they'll swear by it. I've also seen ranchers place small bales in their water tanks to control algae, and it seems to work. Personally, I don't recommend it because you're adding more nutrients to the pond, which is compounding the problem. Ultimately, a multifaceted preventative approach is the key to lasting success. By addressing the root cause of nutrient pollution and cultivating a balanced aquatic ecosystem, you can reduce and eventually eliminate the need for reactive chemical interventions, ensuring a healthier, clearer, and more stable pond for years to come. That's all I have for you in this episode of Pondweed Problems. If you gained something from this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you would hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Doing that helps grow this channel so I can keep making these videos for you guys. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments and let me know if there's something that you're interested in that you'd like me to cover in another video. Now remember, you don't need a PhD or a master's degree to master the science of pondology. It's your pond, so don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with it. You can create your dream pond. You can be your own biologist.